Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me. It's brilliant to have so many of you here. I do so hope that you are keeping well and safe in these uncertain and surreal times. My name is Sian Jones, and as you can see, I am here in the Media First studios, and very nice they are too. And I'm actually supported as well by a team of technicians and producers, but I have seen none of them because often is the way now that we are isolating at home. I actually came here today, I pumped in the code, I came here, sat in front of a camera, and now I know that I am supported by others online, but I am actually in splendid isolation. And that's so much the way things are going, isn't it? And it's also, actually, if you think about media interviews, often the way that spokespeople are asked to go to some remote studio to actually plug in, not see a human being, deliver their message down the line to the camera, and then go home. And in fact, it was interesting on my way here, I actually listened to Radio 4, and Nick Robinson and Martha Carney were giving themselves a little bit of a pat on the back because they actually did the Today programme remotely today from each of their homes and still managed a seamless broadcast, which is absolutely wonderful. And of course, at Media First, we are so lucky, aren't we, to have these wonderful surroundings. But as we are seeing, people are setting up quite easily and having a simple backdrop and able to broadcast from anywhere they like at home. But I do think it's actually really nice and really useful to have a team of technicians and producers, if you've got some people available, to give everybody a role. You know, they can help with the polls, the quizzes, the Q&A and the chats. And actually, you then can really concentrate on the message and the delivery. Or, of course, you could get in touch with us here at Media First and we could handle the whole thing remotely for you. Now, as we've seen, I don't know about you, but I'm getting loads of emails from companies saying that they're now offering online training. But actually here at Media First, we've been doing this for the past 5 years. So what is today all about? Well, I am really excited to have your attention here for the next 40 minutes or so. And the purpose of this webinar really is to have a conversation with you about effective online communication. And of course, these are, and we keep hearing this word in the news, don't we, unprecedented times. We're seeing people anxious, concerned, panicked about how they're going to survive, what's happening to their jobs, and how long the world is going to look like this. And actually, I, as a communications specialist, am a true believer that we all need to step up now and that we need to communicate brilliantly and do that online to support, manage and lead our teams in the times of crisis. So as a TV presenter, a journalist, a speaker coach and a webcast trainer, I've been helping people for years now communicate effectively online and to really have online presence when it matters most. So what I'm doing today is I'm going to talk you through my top 10 tips, and that's going to take around 30 minutes, and then we're going to leave about 10 minutes of questions at the end. So do please submit them via the Q&A button that you can see at the bottom of your screen. And actually, as you submit them, and do feel free to do this as you go along, what you will see is that there's an option to put a little thumbs up button. So if you like that question and if you think actually that's relevant to me and you'd like that answer, do give it a thumbs up, because actually the more of those we have, the higher the votes, the more likely we are to be able to get that question answered and prioritize it. But we will try to get through as many as possible. We've also got a chance for a poll or two to keep it really interactive and fun. And there's also an opportunity for you to win some great online training here at Media First. More details of that a little bit later on. So first up, let's kick things off and let's just remind ourselves of how things can get a little bit out of hand without a bit of preparation for online communication.
Scandals happen all the time. The question is, how do democracies respond to those scandals?
And what will it mean for the wider region? I think one of your children has just walked in. I mean, shifting sands in the region. Do you think relations with the North may change?
I would be surprised if they do. Pardon me.
That's right, carry on.
My apologies.
What's this going to mean for the region?
My apologies. South Korea's policy choices on North Korea have been severely limited in the last 6 months to a year. Because
I think that's such an infamous clip now, isn't it? I think we've all seen it and all sympathised. And I know, you know, as a mother of three myself with my three kids, that they are always ready to give me some angst and some chaos. And actually, I've seen loads of online meetings on social media this week. I've seen kids with Nerf guns in the background causing chaos. I've seen one guy rock up for a meeting in his pajamas, not realizing that actually he was going to be in vision. And actually, you know what, a funny story. I remember when I started doing online training, the first online participant I had, I went live to her. And for some reason, she decided it was okay actually for her to rock up in her nightie, which I thought was a bit strange anyway. And then I said, okay, so we'll get started. Have you got a pen? And she said, no, I haven't got a pen. I said, oh, well, perhaps you want to go and get one. And as she turned round, her nightie was tucked into the back of her knickers, which was quite a way to make an impact, but perhaps not the most professional way to get started. Anyway, that clip that we saw there with or without audio shows the perils of going live. And actually, that is my first tip. So let's take a look, live or pre-recorded. So those are the choices that you have, and it really is up to you. So you will see that Freddie Mercury is here now. He was marvellous, wasn't he? He was the king of always going live. And of course, there are lots of advantages to that. And in many cases, that's exactly what you're going to do. It is, of course, totally up to you, whichever you feel most comfortable with. So, of course, once you've decided which tool is right for you, and let's face it, there are an awful lot of tools out there to choose from, think about whether you want to go live or pre-recorded. Many meetings, Zoom meetings, for example, when you're having a weekly catch up with your teams, is of course going to be live. And that's what absolutely everybody is suggesting. It might be an idea following that clip to put maybe a silence note outside the door so your kids are kept out or your dogs don't bark. Not that I'm suggesting your dogs can read, but that everybody knows that a meeting is going on. So what about pre-recorded? Well, I would say that at Media First, we talk an awful lot about the difference between live and pre-recorded, particularly when we are talking about media training. But for people at home or for CEOs of businesses that actually have a really complex detailed message that they want to get across, it might be an idea to think about pre-recorded, and there are various advantages to this. So although of course people are now getting very used to delivering their meetings down the barrel of a lens, a lot of people aren't very comfortable. So at Media First, we work with people like you to make sure that you're really confident when it comes to being online on camera. And for example, I was working just the other day with a CEO, and the format that he preferred to use was me doing a Q&A session in order for him to get his message across. And that actually worked really, really well because he was relaxed, he was natural, and actually if he didn't like what he'd said, we just stopped and pre-recorded it. So that's just one example, but of course the choice is up to you. But what I would say is have some fun, get creative. There are lots of ways to communicate brilliantly online. And of course, it's also worth mentioning, isn't it, that we like to think webinars have come a long way in the last 10 years or so. But, you know, as we've seen there, the perils of audio not working and things going down, you know, we'd like to trust them, but we have to be aware that there could well be technical hitches. And most online platforms now will actually allow you to edit recordings afterwards, so that if there is a problem, you can just cut this out specifically for the on-demand version. Let's move on now to my second tip. And this is make sure that you start and end on time. So thankfully we were able to start on time, but there's nothing more irritating, is there, than actually hanging around online waiting for a meeting to start if you are the one who's been prompt and on time in the first place. So we're always talking about the importance of preparation. So if you're hosting the meeting, get here early, test everything technical, you know, make sure the audio works, check your background and your eye line, so that when people start to join you, you are calm and composed and you are good to go. So for example, I've been here for a few hours this morning just checking things and making sure that the eye line is good so that actually we can have that conversation. And if people do show up late, people often say, you know, what should I do? If half the people aren't here, you know what, I think just go ahead and start, because you don't want to annoy those who have been particularly time conscious and turned up when they said they should. And late people, they can always use the software, can't they, to watch a recording a little bit later on. And the issue is often people will say, Sean, you know, how long should webinars be? How long can people concentrate? And I think that this is a real challenge, isn't it, when you're delivering stuff online? You know, much as we like to think that actually people are not going to be multitasking and that everybody's going to be hanging on your every word for all that time, actually it is not true. So I would say try to keep things concise and punchy. It depends what the scenario is. If it's a weekly update meeting, you might only need 10 minutes, mightn't you? But if it's a more formal webinar, and that's what I'm talking about here, then possibly look at doing 25 minutes of the main body of the content. You might have panelists as well to keep it interactive, and then maybe 10 to 15 minutes of Q&As at the end. So the whole thing runs to around 45 minutes. But do get there early. I think, you know, it's really important to actually make sure that you are on time and you're ready to go, but also finish when you say you're going to. There's nothing worse than actually people droning on when there's really no need. Have a clear action plan, a call to arms, any details that your audience need to know in terms of surveys, and there is a survey at the end of this one, so I shall be clear to tell you about that, next steps, next meeting times, etc. Okay, so let's move on to tip number 3. Tip number 3 is prepare. So preparation is everything, isn't it? And it begins with thinking, actually, I think about how you want to come across to your audience. Presenting online requires an awful lot of energy. So I always say, right, okay, professional, upbeat, enthusiastic is really also always good. And being clear of the purpose. So you might be updating your teams, calling for a weekly update, or just making sure that everybody's okay and staying connected and that their mental well-being is okay and motivated. But actually the audience will assume that what they're seeing is actually a reflection of your state of mind. So it really is vital to consider the tone that you want to set. Tip number 4 now. Think about your background. Now, this is a really made me smile. Actually, this is a really great example. Now, Mr. Farage really didn't have any control of what was going on, but of course, at home, we do. So make sure shelves are cleared and there is nothing to distract your audience. It's really easy for people to try and focus in on your book titles, paintings, instead of you. So for example, yesterday lunchtime, I was watching the lunchtime news, and Norman Smith, who you may well know, the BBC correspondent, so he's always live, isn't he, at the Houses of Parliament or outside Westminster, but it was clear that he was at his office at home yesterday. But there was actually quite a bit of distraction. There was cluttered shelves. There was a picture on the wall, which I thought, oh, maybe that's a man in a military man in a uniform. I thought maybe that was his grandfather, his great-grandfather. There was a globe, there was a computer, and there was a mug. But obviously here you can see that we've got a few things here that hopefully aren't too distracting. But actually, I don't remember anything of what Norman said because I was too busy having a little snoop around his office. The other important thing is to think about the camera angle. So make sure where your webcam is, position it right so that it's actually straight on, or actually pointed slightly down to your eye line, even if this means sitting it on some books to make it higher. Just make sure that whatever you're using is steady and it doesn't start to rock with vibrations. But also, we don't want to be looking up people's noses, do we? So somebody I saw yesterday on the BBC News had positioned it wrong, and it wasn't a pleasant experience. And also make sure you set yourself in the center of the frame and think about the lighting. Now, people often forget about the lighting, but actually it is so important. So for example, if you're at home, don't sit too close to a window because actually you might look a little bit washed out. And if you've got no choice, I think the great thing would be, you know, just try turning yourself side on so that you look softly lit from the side. That might be a little bit more flattering. Or try playing with the curtains to see what works. Now, audio, we have to talk about this because this is the Achilles heel, I think, of webinars and online training. Buy a decent microphone, a speaker, a headset if you can. If you have one, that's wonderful. I know we can't go to the shops these days, but maybe Amazon you could get something, but it really makes a huge difference. It doesn't have to be expensive, but it really will improve the quality and make sure that you are heard. And I'll give you an example, actually. A few years ago, actually it was a good 10 years ago, I wrote a sort of online training course, and I was pitching it to the guy that I thought would be interested at the training company. And I put everything together. I did the rehearsal, the practice. I was good to go. And actually I ran it and it went really well. And at the end I said, right, has anybody got any questions? And the guy that was the man I was trying to sell the course to said, yeah, very good, Sean. But was anybody else actually really put off by that humming that ran from the beginning of it right the way through to the end? And I had my head in my hands, because that's all they remembered. They didn't remember my content. They just remembered the awkward audio. So that's why I say that poor audio really can be the Achilles heel. And I felt deflated, and that all of my hard work had been in vain. Thank you, by the way, for the questions that are coming in. They're coming in thick and fast, so that's absolutely wonderful. Tip 5, let's look at this now. This is all about body language. So with webcams, of course, you can be seen, can't you? Or not, if you'd rather turn it off, but you are often restricted in what you can convey with your facial expressions as well as your body language. And actually, Malcolm Gladwell, in his book Blink, says that people make their minds up about you in 2 seconds, which is actually rather generous, in the blink of an eye. Now, of course, you may well be talking to your teams and they know you, don't they? But actually, if you rock up and you're looking tired, washed out and drained, people may not engage. They may just be worried about your own well-being and not what you've got to say. So think about how you want to come across. It may be no need, of course. People might think it's weird in a weekly update for you to turn up in a suit and a tie, but actually something that frames you, gives that authority and that structure to the way that you are looking. And we talk a lot about this in our media training courses at Media First, and also in presentation skills. And I do think it's hugely important. So just a few tips to share with you. You may well remember these if you've attended one of our courses. So block colours look really good on camera. Navy and grey are transmitting authority. I would say avoid black, avoid white. They are harsh and they can make you look rather stern or washed out. Patterns and stripes, we've all seen it, haven't we, on the news, and you've thought, oh gosh, I remember that tie over what you're saying. So keep those out of the mix. Large earrings, pieces of jewellery, all of that stuff is distracting to your audience. Keep your hair off your face, note to self. Have a shave and say, actually, this image that I'm projecting is really important because it says, we are still open for business and I am here to engage you and to support you. And we also at Media First talk a lot about acronyms, and you may well remember this one. So I'm going to say to you now, and I'm imagining lots of you are going to be sitting up on this one, BBC. So what does that stand for? It stands for bum in the back of the chair. Think about sitting up. And actually, I take that further, FOF. What does that stand for? Feet on floor. It'll give you that added gravitas and authority. And your posture is hugely important. I know all too well from reading the ITV morning news very early in the morning how easy it is to slouch. And what that says is, I am feeling tired. So you have to work harder, don't you, to keep the energy going online. Sit up, check your posture is straight, relax your shoulders and start with a smile, ensuring that you connect with the webcam. And choose whether you see your audience. I've had the choice today to have you all dotted around the screen, but actually I thought I would talk as if I was talking to an audience of one through the webcam, although I know you are all there. And I would keep your hands on the table and use them to add to the energy of what you're saying, if you are someone who naturally gestures. And think of the framing. People often worry that actually they can't use their hands on camera, and you'll see what I'm doing. We'll talk about script delivery in a minute, because you can see that I'm kind of scrolling through my bullet points as well as engaging with you. But actually gestures are hugely important. They add natural energy. But I would say do avoid playing with stuff like picking up a pen and clicking it. Sounds obvious, doesn't it? Excuse me. Or, your glasses, playing with your glasses, that's a good one, isn't it? But also stroking your face, which many of us do without even realizing it. A smile is important. It says, hello, I am confident, I am happy to be here, and actually will do wonders for setting the right tone of the meeting, particularly in these times when people may be feeling very worried. Make sure everything's open and not crossed, and that your eyes are focused on the camera. I think it's fine, isn't it, to look down, or actually I'm scrolling through and just looking at my notes occasionally, but wandering eyes can make you look shifty and actually make you look rather uncomfortable, and I suppose a bit unprepared. And if you're connecting vocally with your audience and you can't be seen, as is the way with some webinars, you could think about standing up, couldn't you, to deliver stuff for added energy and impact. Do try it. I know some people that actually when they take a call that's really important, they only ever stand up to take that call, pacing around the room. But imagine that you have to actually be very still when you are on camera. So actually, if you don't want to be seen, and you want to stand, why not put the laptop on a higher shelf so that it's eye level with you, and then make sure you are anchored, because people tend to be rockers or swayers. So I'm wondering what you are all. Are you a rocker? Are you a swayer? Get yourself planted so you have that added gravitas and authority. And all of these things are discussed in our training. So here's a reminder of what Media First is all about.
Media First. We're specialists in communication training. We help our clients with all of their communication challenges. In the last 5 years alone, we've trained over 10,000 people across 45 different sectors. Yes, we're known for delivering high-quality, bespoke media training, but there's so much more to Media First. Want to train 50 people in 3 hours to be more compelling communicators? No problem. What if you need to help 200 people manage the early stages of a media crisis, but they're based in 15 different countries? We'll get them together using the latest online technology. Maybe you want to help your senior management team deliver their personal brand, get them to be more engaging with their presentations, or even during team meetings. We can do that. Oh, and social media, we're across that too. Whether you're at the start of your social media journey and need help with strategy, or just want to create some standout content.
Before Media First, I would use lots of different agencies, and it required a lot of briefing. It meant that I'd be getting in different people for the PR media, different people for speech training, different people for the internal comms and HR training, and it was onerous. So it was great to find Media First. You can throw any communications challenge at them and they'll come up trumps.
All of our training is completely bespoke, designed by dedicated account managers and delivered by outstanding communication coaches, journalists and trainers. Media First. We're not just a media training company, we're specialists in communication training.
So just a little reminder of what we are all about. So don't forget, we do presentation skills, media skills, key message development, crisis communications, and of course, what we're talking about today, which is online communications. Okay, let's move on to my next tip, and this is all about voice. We've touched upon it a moment ago, haven't we? But voice, I think, is just so hugely important and so often overlooked. Connecting strongly, vocally is absolutely vital. And chatting in an online meeting, of course, has a very different energy, doesn't it, to speaking in front of a live audience. So make sure that you start with the right tone. I think a smile at the start, as we talked about earlier, is really, really important. Add some vocal emphasis where appropriate. Sound energetic and watch your speed. And you know what, one idea, if you are talking for a while, is to really break up your content into bite-sized little chunks that people can absorb, that also enables you to build in pauses and to avoid those, you heard one a moment ago, disfluencies, those ums and ahs that we all do. And I'm not saying you want to get rid of those altogether, because you don't want to be so polished and over-prepared, but actually it is important to know what you're going to say. And when I'm helping people, what I try to get people to do is to really focus on the opening. What do they want to say? And how can they say that? And actually we try to banish ums and ahs from the first paragraph or so. So people miss as well that sort of day-to-day chat, don't they, by the water cooler. So use the meetings before you start to actually catch up with your team, find out how they are, find out how they're coping before you then launch into your script. And I would say that a script, depending on the formality of the meeting, of course, is great at the start, and it makes sure that you remember to outline stuff, the agenda, tell people what to expect, how long we're going to be together. But actually, in my experience, what I found is scripting all the way through just doesn't work. So you want it to be natural, you want it to be relaxed, and, bullet points are best, and lots of rehearsal, so that it sounds natural and conversational. Also, people are going to be looking out for signs of confidence, aren't they? And I think that way it comes through loud and clear in your speech. What do people do though, generally? What do I see? I see people speed through. So think about the pace and build in pauses. So you have to build in pauses to your speeches or your conversations so that people can really absorb what you're saying. If you cast your mind back to just a couple of nights ago when Boris Johnson made his address to the nation, you will think about his diction, his tone, and the fact that his sentences were short, they were sharp, they were concise, and in between, you've guessed it, there was an awful lot of pauses so that we could absorb the message and just how serious this was for the country. And of course, I can give you lots of tips on how to look after your voice. You can see I've got some water here, which is brilliant. And I think if you can't be seen in a webinar, you can pause and say, I'm just having a sip of water now, so that your audience know exactly what's going on. Tony Blair, all those years ago, he was a great one for warm water and honey to lubricate his vocal cords, and things to avoid. Loads of coffee, not good. Dries out your throat. It acts as a diuretic. And also something to think about is if you are having a breakfast meeting, for example, and you've just had your breakfast, often if you have a lot of dairy, a lot of lactose, it can make you sound a little bit gulpy. So you might want to think about having a piece of toast instead. So carrying on from that, there is an acronym, another one that we use at Media First. And it really is important when it comes to tone to look at this one. And you will see here the stethoscope, no more relevant now with the NHS and everything that they are doing, but actually you need to show that you care. So what does that stand for? This is my 7th tip. In times of crisis, you need to show compassion. Do you sound like you are human, like you are listening, like you care if the situation demands it? And the A coming next, I wonder if anybody can guess, is action. What are you doing to help your people in these worrying times? And the R, of course, is to reassure people in times of concern and crisis. And the E is example. So we're big on examples here. Can you tell me what you're doing? So at Media First, we're offering online training to help support our clients to be effective communicators from home. Let's move on to tip number 8 now. And this is actually about the content. So we've talked a lot, haven't we, about how you look and how you sound, but actually, what do we want to say? This is all about your content. And I suppose it's really the same sort of tips when delivering face-to-face, with a few exceptions. So much as we'd like to think, as I said earlier, that it is unlikely people will be mesmerized from start to finish by your performance and won't be tempted to actually dip in and out and multitask. It's really, really important to be clear, to be concise. And I would say it's just as important as how you are delivering your message. And also have a think about the message, what they need to hear. And we also talk about how you want your audience to feel during and after your chat. Start with a strong opening, adopt a conversational tone, limit the number of points you are trying to get across, and use those examples that I talked about a moment ago to make your content really come alive and stick with your audience. Don't bore people with facts and figures and statistics if painting a picture is always 10 times better. And whether you need to get something complicated across or you are looking to inspire, you need to develop and refine that message first. So practice those opening words, rehearse. I'm a great one for rehearsing beforehand, and make sure that you know what the purpose of that conversation will be. And of course, we have a great opportunity online, don't we, to interact with polls and quizzes and to break stuff up with Q&A. So I think it might be time to take a poll. So polls are great. You can set them up in advance and you're going to see one in a minute. So I'm going to ask you to take a look at this. And this is really all about your online tools that you use at the moment. So you can see there. So what platform will you use? You might already be using this to deliver your online broadcast. So it would be so brilliant to see which ones are the most popular. Okay, so Zoom heading onwards at the moment, around about 64%. Yeah, so I certainly use Zoom, and in my experience, Skype is really popular. But you might be beholden to whoever your IT company says you can use. But yes, okay, so that's brilliant. We can see there that the most popular ones are Zoom at 57% there, and Skype coming in at 39%. Twitch got a little bit of a way to go, hasn't it? And Google Hangouts at 15%. Thank you, that's brilliant. So that's a great example of just how we can get things interactive and use polls in real time. Let's move on now to my next tip, which is actually, if you are using slides, keep them simple, but actually visually memorable. And we'll talk about the difference between, you know, if you're a face-to-face doing a meeting back in the old days, or whether you're actually sharing your PowerPoint with your audience now. A lot of conferencing will allow you to share your screen, of course, so you can see your audience. And this is really useful for supporting key points and messages and sharing that PowerPoint. But if you do need to use slides, keep them simple, visual, and do remember that actually less is always more. And I would say the difference between face-to-face and online is that actually your slides are really going to be scrutinized, aren't they, more carefully. So make sure they've got a purpose, they're well produced, and that there are no spelling mistakes. And use your slides as a brief reminder of the topic, a simple headline. If you do want to use bullets, just limit them to 3 and 4. But as I said earlier, you know, a picture really paints 1,000 words. So I hope you've liked the slides that we've chosen today that are really, really strong visuals to back up my points as we go through the top 10 tips. And people often say, actually, you know what, online, how many slides should I use? So if you've got a half an hour of content, I would say that each slide should represent about 2 minutes of material. Any more than about 12 slides, and I think things can get really, really overwhelming. Practice before you deliver it, see if that slide has a purpose, and make sure that you can deliver it with good articulation and at a great pace, and that everybody can understand, and that, you know, the old adage, you are not letting the tail wag the dog and being led by the slides. There is, interestingly, a school of thought, though, that says that if you're delivering a PowerPoint presentation online, that sometimes it can be too much to actually have your face in the corner and the slides and everybody concentrating on what you say. So some people prefer to revert to a radio show. And I always remember Terry Wogan's line of actually asked, you know, when he was asked how many viewers he had, and he had viewers of millions, didn't he? But actually he connected vocally through his voice, and he said, I have an audience of one, just one. So something to think about, actually. Do you want to be envisioned? Do you want to be seen throughout that PowerPoint presentation? And the old adage, don't ask your audience to read huge chunks of text. You know, that might be a separate handout that they can receive a little bit later on. I can't believe that we are on tip number 10 already. Time is running ahead. So let's look at tip number 10. This is about interaction, which we're already doing, and really ending strongly. We've seen today lots of ways to keep things conversational and impactful. Polls and quizzes are just some of the ways. Strong visuals, engaging body language, and the right tone will all make for a great online experience. And also you can invite questions, as I said at the start, so you can take those as you want to go along, which is an interesting way to do it, or you can leave it to the end, which is what we've chosen to do. And sometimes people think, oh, well, if I take them as I go along, you know, I might get thrown off course, or it might be that I'm coming to that. But actually, it does encourage other people to get involved. So think about what's on people's minds and actually try and anticipate some of those questions. But I have always found that taking questions at the end really works, so it has its own dedicated section. So in a moment, we're going to hand over to James and ask him. So James, are you there? James is the MD of Media First, and today he's helping me with the questions. So let's see what you have been asking.
Hi, Sean. Yeah,
Hi,
I'm
James.
here, loud and clear.
Yes, great. What sort of questions have we got coming in?
There's quite a few coming in, to be honest with you. We did have some submitted prior to the webinar starting, but there's been quite a few on the chat as well, and via the Q&A. So let's jump in. There's one which is from Sarah, who she's asking, should we be a little bit more relaxed when we're in company meetings, talking to our colleagues about, you know, an internal meeting, and if a child comes into the room, is that such a bad thing?
No, I think that's a really good point. And actually, I think that's exactly right. You want to be relaxed, don't you? You want to be yourself. And actually, you want to be conducting the meetings as much as possible as you would online, as you would face to face. But we're all aware, aren't we? We're all trying to juggle and multitask. So actually, if a child comes in, I know you and I were having a conversation in the week, and I constantly kept getting interrupted by a child asking when lunch was, or could I help with the online homework? So I absolutely agree. I don't think it's a problem. And I think people appreciate, you know, that we're trying to be as professional as possible, but particularly in those online relaxed weekly updates, daily updates, then I think that's fine and everybody understands.
I agree. And a kind of similar theme here, I guess this one's from Claire, and she's asking the question, you know, how can she encourage her spokespeople to perhaps not be so reliant on filler words like and a and things like that?
Yes, so that's a really good one. As I said earlier, I'm trying not to learning the opening of what you want to say, being very clear on the purpose of the meeting, even if it is a virtual chat, is important. There are various ways to get rid of those ums and ahs, chunking up your content, making things short and concise, particularly at the start, thinking about your sentence length and keeping things punchy. And then when you feel an coming on, taking a pause, because actually people will appreciate being given time in between those chunks of information to absorb what you've said.
I'm impressed that you delivered that without any filler words whatsoever.
Thank you. We've got to practice what we preach, haven't we?
Another question here I've got, it's an anonymous submission, but it says, how do you maintain energy and engagement when just staring at the camera?
I think that's such a key one. And actually, I think many people, you know, don't necessarily think, oh, I have got to have loads of energy, but you do. So I think online, it's more important than ever to be yourself, but actually to raise your game by about 10% so that it's a performance. And I would say, you know, depending on whether it's a very formal webcast or webinar, you have to keep the energy going. And also you should come away feeling absolutely exhausted. I know after this webinar, I'm going to go and have a quick lie down. But it is about keeping that energy going. And it's what, you know, we're working from home now. Things are slightly more relaxed. And actually, you know, if you're lucky enough to have an outside space or whatever, you can go and sit down, read a book for half an hour afterwards. But actually, I shouldn't be encouraging that if you're working from home, but actually be the best you can be on camera and really put in that energy. So I think looking after yourself is also really, really important.
There's a couple more questions for you, I think. Any questions, guys, that we've not been able to answer live, we will answer these offline, and we will send an email to everybody so that they can see those answers. There was a question around, I'm struggling to find it right now if I'm honest, guys, but there was a question here around how you stay in control. So if you're asked a question that feels like it's going to knock you off guard, Sian, I could ask you something really nasty now and see how you cope, but what would your advice be on that?
I think it's interesting, isn't it? So different styles of meeting allow people to interrupt. And actually, one of the tips that I had as part of when we're looking at voice and also Q&A sessions is actually, if somebody does, you often have that awful ping pong moment of, no, you go up, and you have that awful disjointed delay, don't you? So in that instance, if somebody asks a question, I think being very clear about where you're going to take questions and what's the format of the meeting and what's the purpose. So if people want to ask questions as you go along, you need to be able to be aware that actually it may derail your content, but you might be up for that. And actually tips like, I'm going to come back to that one. Let's leave it there. You and I can talk about that separately. Let's move it back to my next point. And being very, very clear that actually you're in control so that actually you don't get derailed is quite simple with a bit of practice.
I'm going to do a couple more because there's some great questions in here.
Yeah.
What tips do you have for those blank moments when no matter how hard you try, you completely lose your trail of thought? And that's from Julia.
Okay, so Julia, yes, that is often the case, isn't it? So I would say preparation, rehearsal. Now, I don't know if Julia is talking about formal presentations online or whatever, but that moment of, so there's several things I would say. So here you can see online, I have got some bullet points beneath me. I've got a script here, and this comes from working at ITV years ago. I'm sure they won't mind me saying the auto cue used to go down a lot. And if you didn't want to look completely stupid, or as if you looked as if you'd forgotten what you were saying next, you had a hard copy with you. And I think online people are slightly more forgiving about that, aren't they? Because actually they know that you're going to have some kind of aid or prompt. But face to face, you have to realize that actually, and online, this is the first time people have heard your content. So take a pause. You might want to ask a question at that point to say, let's just recap on where we are. What are the key points that you've taken away? Then they can answer. And then by that time, hopefully you either glance down at your notes or things have come back on track. But yeah, it's very, very common to have that awful brain freeze where you don't know where you're supposed to be going next. I remember as an actress, I had that stage fright, and how I got over that was rehearsing and practicing so that I now won't have that happen again.
Sian, one last question. I'm going to take this as a rhetorical one, or I might just answer this now. Yep. This is from Deborah, who says, do we have the option to see James as he's asking the question? Deborah, I'm very flattered. We do have the option to present me as I'm answering these questions. And I specifically chose not to because I didn't want to be shown up by Sian.
Very modest.
Sian, over to you. Thank you very much.
Okay, and thank you so much for those questions. That's brilliant. Okay, so let's reiterate my top tips. I wonder if you can remember them all, but here is a little aid memoir for you. So tip number 1, you remember Freddie Mercury, it was live or pre-recorded. The other one was to start and end on time, which hopefully we're going to do in a minute. The third one was the importance of preparation. 4 was talking about the setup, lots of things to think about there so that it looks as professional as possible. 5, we talked about looking your best. 6, sounding your best. You remember the acronym that came in at number 7, to care for your people. And 8, keeping those messages clear, concise, punchy and simple. And also, if you are going to use slides, the same rule of thumb there goes, keeping those simple as well. And then, as I said before, a wonderful opportunity online to interact and also to end strongly so people know what to expect. So those are my top 10 tips. I really hope you've enjoyed them, and I'm so grateful that you have come in. Now, I've got one more tip coming on. It's a little added extra that we thought of the other day, but thank you so much for joining me. It has been brilliant to have you all here. So if you have any communications challenges, then do please get in touch. We'll show our details in just a moment. And also do check out the website, because actually there's loads of information there, over 600 blogs and tips, case studies and advice, as well as videos, downloads, as well as ebooks. Now, you saw him flash up on the screen. Let's have him back there. A sight for eyes, Joe Wicks. Now, why is he there? Well, we know that actually his online training has gone berserk, hasn't he? I mean, he really has tapped into the kiddies and the fitness market. So I think it was up to 1.5 million people are tuning in. And actually, James and I were talking about this the other day when it came to the timing of meetings, because actually, do you want to schedule a meeting at 9:30 when possibly a lot of your people have been doing the Joe Wicks workout? I'm going to give it a go because I understand actually it does work you quite hard, but do you want your team turning up looking like a sweaty mess who've just worked out? So think about the timings. And I think many meetings, you know, they're held on the hour, aren't they? So 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. But actually, sometimes with broadband width and the strength of just how many people are doing stuff online, sometimes it might be easier just to schedule it at 10 past or 1/4 the hour, just to give the network time to catch up. So think about that. But yeah, I thought that was quite funny with Joe Wicks there. But also, I do think have fun with your meetings. You know, people need to feel, you know, they need to feel engaged, don't they? And they need to have fun in this really, really, in a time that none of us have known the like. But also, I was looking on social media and I saw some people having face mask Fridays. So I thought that was quite good. That was meetings. At the end of the meeting, people got face masks out, not the coronavirus face mask. Things like there was a sheep, there was a joker, as well as a rabbit. So that was quite funny. Fitness Fridays, a little bit of a workout there to follow on from Joe Wicks, and even having a Friday drink. Isn't that a great idea? All of your team, let's just go off, get our favourite tipple, and let's just have a chat with the competition thrown in. Now, talking of competitions, if you've got time to complete the survey that will come up after you've logged off this webinar, that would be so brilliant, because actually you might be able to get some free training here at Media First. We are going to throw your name in if you're kind enough to fill out that survey, because it would be so brilliant to know what you think of the webinar, to actually throw that into a hat for a 3-hour-long one-to-one Zoom training session. This could be on presentation skills, could be on media skills, could be on online training skills, whatever you fancy. So I'm going to sign off now, but I want to thank you. And I've been Sian Jones here at Media First. Thank you so much, and do stay safe and well. Bye-bye.